And thank you for staying with us. Welcome to those who've just joined us. This is All Angles on eNCA. Now, most children entering grade 2 don't know the alphabet. But despite this literacy crisis, there is no reading plan, budget or accurate reporting. This is according to the 2030 Reading Panel's background report. The panel, led by former Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, is on a mission to ensure all children can read by 2030. For more on this, we are joined by one of the panelists and Equal Education Secretary General, Noncedo Madubedube. Thank you very much, Noncedo, for your time here on eNCA. Now, this is something that the President said in 2019 we're looking towards as a country, to have children read, but not only read for understanding by 2030. That is in about 7 years' time. Does it look like we're going to reach that?
Absolutely not. So the trajectory that we're on at the moment, so pre-COVID, we thought we could get children reading for meaning to about 27% in 2030. Now, with the disruptions of this COVID period, the loss of learning time, the blended learning approaches that were an absolute fail from government, the rotational timetable that would urge the government over many months to drop and have learners fully return back to school, all meant that we've lost about 10 years, a decade of progress in being able to run interventions through the departments of education, both national and provincially, to get learners being able to comprehend as they learn to read. Where we're sitting now is that we're approximating that we'll only be able to get 100% of all learners to read for meaning at the current trajectory in 86 years. Now, that is over a century of generations lost that aren't able to read for meaning in South Africa. And that both has social implications, economic implications, and what we're calling for in this period as a result of this panel is some political will to get provinces for education at a provincial level and nationally proactively thinking about a plan that will address reading in the foundation phase of learning in public schools across South Africa in the immediate. So this month of February for us is a gathering of like-minded people that are interested in literature and reading and children and the basic right to education in South Africa. But what we're doing it for in this period really is to try and garner support and get languaging and a commitment from government through the State of the Nation address, through the budget speech coming forth in the next 2 weeks, to get both plans and a commitment from our government to make sure that we are, in fact, prioritizing the right to basic education through focusing on reading interventions and foundation phase learning. Otherwise, we will have lost a decade of the majority of the population, which is Black children in South Africa, unable to comprehend thought and words.
And, you know, does these scary statistics that you have here, for instance, talking about only 14% of the country's children being able to read for meaning, etc., that's quite scary. Does this translate to the matrics that have to now move to varsity, where there is no teacher assistance and most of the work that they have to do in varsity, they have to do independently? Could this also just filter into the statistics around dropouts in university?
Oh, absolutely. So some folks at the conference have coined a concept where folks have been saying it is careless of government and the departments of basic education to consider and prioritize the roof as opposed to the foundation, if you were to think of an analogy of building a house. So the learners in foundation phase learning at the moment, the ones that we're recording learning losses for this COVID period, will be in trick in about 10 years' time. And in about 10 years' time, we've said to you the trajectory doesn't improve drastically. So there's a ripple effect in how children are able to move from foundation phase learning all the way up. We lose about 50% of them along the way, in any case, in the education system, and get to their matric final exams in 10 years' time from now. And it's a false dichotomy for the Department of Basic Education to claim increases for that small proportion at that level, when in fact the majority of the population inside the schooling system over a period of 12 years is being severely hampered in realizing the flourish of enjoying the right to basic education that is of quality and equality because of this lack of a strong intervention at a foundation phase learning. I must tell South Africans that what we are asking as a reading panel for people in general society, in the public, to help us put pressure and advocate for is a basics of a bare bones of a reading plan from the Department of Basic Education. At the moment, we are clear that there is no plan and there is no budget associated to a plan to help address foundation phase learning for reading in particular. And the last on this is that people must also recognize that if learners aren't able to read for meaning in the 4th grade to this extent, it means any other subject that follows is also hampered. So you've got similar stats that we can show for mathematical literacy, for example.
And Noncedo, which provinces, for instance, are the most problematic? Which provinces need the most assistance from basic education and maybe even the private sector?
So, look, we must share that we did celebrate and really commend 2 urban provinces, which is no surprise to us, Gauteng and the Western Cape, for at a provincial level, because provinces are responsible for spending the bulk of the education budget, right? So they've been proactive in prioritizing a reading plan and then dedicating funds and finding people in South Africa to run and support interventions at foundation-based learning. And we're calling, so this is also no surprise, that the provinces that have been left behind are, in fact, our rural provinces. And so whenever we talk about education, budgeting, and prioritization and support, we've always called for General Africa, for police, for the Department of Education, for Treasury, for government, the presidency, name it, that we have to think about resource allocation in an equitable way. If we aren't focusing on our rural education, we really lose the majority of the school-going population.
So this is going to probably be another state of disaster then?
It absolutely is a state of disaster. One of the reasons that we met this week, early on, ahead of SONA's and budget speeches, is to try and tell the country that there's a catastrophe on our hands, and it's affecting a group of people that can't speak for themselves. So it's up to us, every single adult person, especially people interested in education and the rights of children in South Africa. We need to stand up and do something together.
Just help me understand, Noncedo, because, when you look at it, the numbers don't correlate for me, and maybe there's something that I don't understand. When the budget is discussed, from the level of national treasury to provincial, education and health get the bulk of the entire budget. Where is this money going if it's not being invested in making sure that all children are able to get, quality education, even those non-paying fee schools? Why does it look like we are instead of going forward, we are regurgitating?
So there are 3 things that we must consider here. The first is that as the education budget is seemingly increasing year on year and or getting the biggest allocation, we're finding that the increases aren't matching inflation. Now, it means that in real terms, nominal value, you might be giving the department another 203 million rand, right? But in real terms, it means that the department is having to do the same bit of work, and we're calling for more because the circumstances are urgent, but with less money, okay? And that is happening, this is the second condition, that is happening inside an education system that has an increased amount of learners accessing the education system. And that's going to point towards the overcrowding crisis, especially in urban provinces, even inside some rural provinces. It means that the trickle-down effect to districts, provinces, and schools is that principals are sitting with severe budget cuts to things like LTSM, this is learning materials, to things like transport, provision of meals, the electricity bill, the ability to hire additional teachers, because there are massive teacher shortages across our education system. So the department and Treasury aren't matching inflation and giving the education system the kinds of money it needs to accommodate its bloating. So those are the first 2 conditions. The third condition is that the Department of Education is a microcosm of our community and our society in South Africa. In the last financial period, we understand 2.4 billion rand of that budget, the Auditor General presented, was spent fruitlessly and wastefully. So there's also a role that we need to be playing as a society, helping government figure out how do you use the money that you do have effectively and efficiently. Now, I'm not claiming corruption yet, but something is going on there. The 4th item, and I'll be done with the story, is that the medium-term budget presentation from Treasury is anticipating running drastic cuts to the education budget because of our austerity agenda in South Africa. And where that budget cut is going to come from predominantly is the wages of teachers. And what we're concerned about is that no intervention in the education system can win or find gains or work without teachers being inside of the system. We already know now that about 43% of teachers will be retiring over the next 10 years, but the department is unable to fill those positions right now, never mind over the next 10-year period. What is going to happen to our schools? Black schools where Black children are in marginalized communities, in rural communities and townships are going to get bigger and bigger in size. And there's no ways you're going to be able to do the very bare bones of teaching and learning in an overcrowded classroom. So these conditions are all what I'd say a polycrisis, really, poly issues in a polycrisis, and they're compounding on further hampering the right. And the right to basic education, South Africans must understand, is immediately realizable. There isn't an excuse in the world that prevents government from making sure that it is fulfilled in real time. So whatever happens in the SONA, whether there's a mention around reading, it means nothing if there's no plan that trickles into the Department of Basic Education's work plan for the year, and then taken on board by the National Treasury and provincial treasuries.
So then we're wasting our time then as a country without sounding like a person who feels as though we shouldn't celebrate the matric class of each year. Of course, we should celebrate when there's an improvement there, etc. But we're jumping the gun a bit if we're going to be celebrating matriculants without looking at the fact that we need to make sure that pupils in grade 0 and grade 1 are able to at least read. Maybe we should start celebrating that first to make sure that the foundation phase, even for after they're done with matric, they'll still be independent enough to go through life.
Exactly. This is also going to sort out and help things like the poverty trap and the rut inside of the most marginalized communities. People that are on this reading panel 2030 that work or rather and are interested in the economics of education will tell you about the compounding impact, which is progressive and productive for the country economically, if we talk about economic growth, as a result of being able to teach children to have them realize their full potential from an early age. And foundation phase really captures levels grade R, which is pre-grade 1, all the way up to grade 3. If a fourth grade learner cannot fully comprehend the alphabet, for example, we are a country in crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you there. Noncedo, hopefully there will definitely be some solutions that will not only end up in black and white, right? Because black and white always looks great in our country. It's the implementation, wouldn't you agree, that's usually, a problem in this country.
We would appreciate even a black and white now. We do need something that regulates what are the bare bones of what a reading plan can look like across provinces and trickle down to across schools. We need basic materials inside every school legislated so that the government knows what exactly to provide. And then from there, we need interventions that support teachers to ensure that people can, in fact, teach reading. We have a scarcity of that kind of resource as well. So when we're talking to general South Africans, to government, to treasury, the presidency and going, slogans we're enough with your slogans now. What we need is action. It's because we actually want something in writing. We want a black and white. So we can take that piece of paper, go back to school communities and go, you are the custodians of making sure that this regulation is achieved. You are due to get support in these ways. Let's work together to make sure that happens. And I'm not leaving out business in this equation. When people think about the CSI programs over the next couple of years, they must consider foundation phase learning and reading particularly as a strong intervention to be making.
Noncedo, thank you very much. I remember Minister Angie Motshekga saying education is not something that is only the responsibility of the government, but that we are all stakeholders. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Noncedo Madubedube is part of the reading panel, which hopes to get more children reading by 2030.